The blizzard had swallowed the valley whole, turning the Colorado mountains into a world of white silence and ghostly breath. Snowflakes shimmered in the dim light like fragments of lost prayers, and each gust of wind sang like something ancient and lonely. In that endless cold, a small cabin stood against the storm, fragile, defiant, alive. Inside, Eva Blackthorne pressed her palm against the frosted window pane and listened to the howl of the wind as if it were whispering her name. The wood crackled in the hearth behind her, but the warmth never seemed to reach her heart. 3 years of widowhood had carved deep lines of solitude into her life, yet nothing felt as cruel as watching her 6-year-old daughter fight for breath on a winter night like this. Ruby's tiny chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm, each cough cutting through Eva like a blade. She had tried everything she knew, willow bark, steam, honey, but the fever burned on, relentless. The world outside was buried under snow. No doctor could reach them, no light could break through the blizzard. She whispered a prayer that trembled like her hands. Please, just one more day, just one more chance. Then came the sound that didn't belong, the muffled stumble of hooves through deep snow, heavy and uneven. Eva froze. The sound grew closer, a labored breath, a low groan, then the dull thud of someone, collapsing beyond the door. Her heart quickened. No traveler should be on this mountain in such weather. She reached for the rifle above the hearth, loaded it with practiced calm, and stood still as the wind screamed outside. Through the fogged glass, she could just make out a figure sprawled in the snow, large and motionless, half buried in white. A dark coat, a fallen horse beside him. The storm pressed against the window like a living thing, but she could still see the glint of metal at his side. A gun. Her pulse thundered. Outlaws roamed these passes sometimes, desperate men with nothing left to lose. She knew better than to show mercy, yet something deep within her stirred. That same compassion her late husband once warned would be her ruin. A faint knock came at the door, weak, uneven. Then a voice, rough as gravel, but threaded with exhaustion. Please, I just need shelter till the storm passes. Eva's throat tightened. She raised the rifle toward the sound. Keep moving, she called, voice steady but thin. I have a sick child and a loaded gun. Silence fell again, broken only by the wail of the wind. Then, softer. Ma'am, my horse is dead. I'm hurt. I won't make it through the night. She wanted to harden her heart, to turn away. She had done it before when danger came knocking. But as Ruby stirred in her fevered sleep, mumbling something about angels, Eva felt a pang so deep it stole her breath. The man outside could be anyone, a killer, a drifter, a lost soul, but he was dying, and she couldn't stand the thought of another life fading beneath her watch. Please don't come inside, she whispered through the door, her voice trembling like candlelight. But don't die out there either. Snowflakes drifted through the small cracks in the wood. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the figure stirred, pushing up on one elbow. Through the swirling white, she saw his face, pale from blood loss, framed by dark hair and eyes that burned like storms. There was danger there, yes, but also something else. Sorrow, maybe, or recognition, as if he had been searching for this door all his life. Eva Blackthorne, he rasped. Hearing her name on a stranger's lips froze her where she stood. How could he know her name? The rifle shook in her hands. "Who are you?" "Colt Ravencrest," he said, each word carried on a shuddering breath. "Your husband saved my life once. Told me if I ever needed help, his wife in the mountains was the kind of woman who could work miracles. Thomas." The sound of her late husband's name tore through her chest like wind through glass. Colt Ravencrest. She had heard the stories. A gunman, a hired killer, a shadow who left blood wherever he went. What business did such a man have with her family's name? Outside, the storm roared louder, swirling like a beast hungry for souls. Ruby coughed again, deep, hollow, the kind of sound that meant there wasn't much time left. Colt's voice came again, weaker now. "There's medicine in my saddlebag. Real medicine. From Denver. Fever tonics, quinine. The kind that works." The world spun. Real medicine. The words struck her like lightning. Every instinct told her to keep that door barred, but every heartbeat of her daughter told her to open it. She saw his shadow sway, saw him fall again into the snow, and before she could think, she was moving. She threw the bolt, pushed open the door, and the wind slammed into her, blinding, freezing, furious. Snow stung her face as she stumbled forward to the man lying crumpled on her porch. He was heavy, his blood seeping dark into the snow. She caught his arm, felt the tremor in his muscles, the heat of fever burning through layers of frost. "Don't die here," she muttered, half to herself. Together they staggered through the doorway. The cabin door slammed shut behind them, shutting out the storm, but not the fear. He collapsed by the fire, gasping, the flickering light revealing the wound. A bullet just below his ribs. His gun belt glinted on the floor, and for a moment Eva hesitated, torn between tending to him and protecting her child. "You brought the medicine?" she asked. He nodded faintly toward the door. Saddlebag, blue bottle for fever, white powder for her chest. "Please, save the girl first." She ran back into the storm, snow clawing at her face, until she found the dead horse half buried beneath white drifts. Her fingers, numb with cold, found the leather strap, unbuckled it, and returned with the pouch clutched to her chest like treasure. Inside, the light flickered warm on the rough walls. She mixed the medicine with trembling hands, lifting Ruby's head and pressing the spoon to her lips. The child swallowed weakly, then sighed, her small body relaxing for the first time in days. Eva's throat ached with gratitude and disbelief. When she turned back, Colt was half-conscious, eyes half open, watching her with something that looked like peace. She knelt beside him, pressing a cloth to his wound. "You should have stayed away," she whispered. He gave a faint smile, a shadow of what it might have once been. "I've been running too long. Maybe it's time to stop." His words lingered in the air like an unfinished prayer. The storm outside began to ease, its fury melting into a rhythmic hush. Eva sat beside the dying fire, between her sleeping daughter and the bleeding stranger who had saved her child. For the first time in years, the cabin no longer felt empty. She listened to their breathing. One slow, steady, healing, the other rough, uneven, but alive. Something within her shifted. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, danger, questions, or hope. But she knew the storm had brought him for a reason. And as the night deepened, she whispered into the quiet, her heart trembling with warmth and wonder, "Sometimes salvation knocks when you least expect it." Outside, the wind carried her words away into the snow, soft and healing. If this story has begun to stir something gentle in your heart, a spark of warmth against your own winter, stay close with us. Like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for the next chapter of this healing Wild West love story. Because sometimes the heart's most dangerous doors open to the most beautiful miracles. Morning crept slowly into the mountains, turning the storm's cruel edges into a soft blanket of light. The cabin was still, the air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and healing herbs. Eva sat by the hearth, her fingers wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee that she had forgotten to drink. Her eyes moved between two fragile heartbeats, the small rise and fall of Ruby's chest, and the labored breathing of the stranger who had carried medicine through the storm to her door. Both were alive, and for now that was enough. Colt Ravencrest slept in the chair by the fire, his dark hair damp with fever sweat, his face pale beneath days of exhaustion. The bullet wound beneath the bandage pulsed with heat, but he had not stirred since she stitched him up the night before. Eva had done her work in silence, the same calm focus that had kept her alive through years of hardship. Yet it was different this time. Each touch, each careful movement, had been weighed with the knowledge that this man had once taken lives with the same hands she was trying to save. The cabin felt heavier now that he was in it, his presence filling the small space with a quiet danger that hummed beneath the warmth. Yet, as she watched him, that danger began to blur into something else. Gratitude, curiosity, the strange pull of two souls scarred by the same loneliness. She rose, checked Ruby's forehead. Cool, the fever had broken. A soft sigh left her lips, trembling between relief and disbelief. The child stirred, blinking open bright eyes that had been dull with sickness for days. "Mama," Ruby whispered, "is he still here?" Eva glanced at the sleeping figure by the fire. "He is." Ruby's voice was small but steady. "He looks sad." That simple observation pierced deeper than any accusation could have. Sad. Yes. Even in sleep, his brow furrowed as if chased by memories he couldn't escape. When Ruby fell back into healing sleep, Eva crossed the floor and knelt beside him. She brushed the damp hair from his temple, hesitated, then pressed the back of her hand lightly to his forehead. The fever was fierce, but not deadly. Her fingers lingered without reason, tracing the faint stubble along his jaw. He was younger than she had thought, though the world had carved years into his face. A man used to pain, used to silence, used to running. He stirred at her touch, eyes flickering open, grey, storm-coloured, sharp, yet strangely calm. For a moment they only looked at each other, the quiet between them more intimate than words. "You should rest," she said finally, her voice softer than she intended. "I've rested long enough," he murmured, his tone rough but gentle. "Your girl, she's better?" "She is, because of you." He gave a faint smile, weary and humble. "Didn't do much?" "Just carried the bottle." "You carried hope," she replied, surprising herself. He held her gaze as if those words meant more than she knew. Something shifted in him, something small, like a piece of armor cracking to reveal light beneath. "Why were you out in that storm?" she asked quietly. "Because sometimes the only way to keep moving forward is to let the storm wash away the man you used to be." His words hung in the warm air, slow and heavy. She looked at him differently now. Not just a stranger, not just a threat. A soul searching for peace, the way she once searched for it in her garden after Thomas died, digging through frozen soil just to feel alive again. Eva stood and brought him a bowl of broth, her hands steady, though her heart trembled. "Eat this," she said. "You'll heal faster." He obeyed, lifting the spoon with slow, careful movements. "Thank you." "Don't thank me." "You earned it." "For carrying medicine? For risking your life when you didn't have to?" A faint smile touched his lips again, real this time. "I owed Thomas a debt. He once saved my life." Eva's breath caught. "He never mentioned you." "He wouldn't have," Colt said quietly. "Back then, I was someone a good man like him wouldn't claim to know. But he did anyway. He pulled me out of a saloon brawl when I was too drunk and too angry to care if I lived. Told me that a man doesn't drown because of the storm. It's because he stops swimming." Eva's chest tightened at the memory of her husband's kindness, his unshakable belief that even broken people could find redemption. Colt looked into the flames as he spoke, his voice low. "When he died, I thought about that night every day. About the man who saw good in me when I didn't deserve it. When I heard he was gone, I promised myself I'd find his family and repay the debt if I ever got the chance." "And now you have," Eva said softly. He shook his head. "Saving one child doesn't erase what I've done." Her eyes softened. "Maybe not, but it's a start." The silence that followed was gentle, not strained, the kind of silence that breathes. Hours passed. The snow outside began to thaw beneath a shy afternoon sun, light spilling through the small window like a blessing. Eva tended to her chores, while Colt watched quietly, his gaze following the rhythm of her hands, the way she kneaded dough, mended clothes, fed the fire. There was grace in her movements, a quiet resilience that spoke of years spent surviving without complaint. "You do everything yourself," he said after a while. "There's no one else to do it." "Thomas was right," he murmured. "You're stronger than most men I've met." She looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "Strength is just what's left when everything else is gone." He seemed to absorb that, then leaned back in the chair, his body relaxing for the first time since he'd arrived. "Maybe that's why I came here," he said softly, "to learn what's left of me." Her heart gave a small, painful twist. She didn't want to feel sympathy, didn't want to see him as anything but a temporary guest. Yet something in his tone, something honest and raw, unraveled her walls one thread at a time. That evening, as the sky blushed into twilight, Ruby woke again, her fever gone, her eyes bright with wonder. "Mamma, can I sit by the fire?" Eva nodded and helped her to the rug. Colt smiled faintly, his storm-grey eyes softening at the sight of her. "You look better, little one." "Are you still hurt?" Ruby asked with the unfiltered concern of a child. "Some," he admitted. "But I'll live." "You saved me," she said solemnly. Colt looked startled, as if the words carried a weight he didn't know how to hold. "I think you saved me too," he said quietly. Ruby tilted her head, considering. "Then we're even." Eva's throat tightened at the exchange. There was something healing in their words, something pure. The warmth of the fire spread through the cabin, but it wasn't the flames that chased the cold away. It was the fragile beginning of trust. Night came softly, wrapping the cabin in silver quiet. Eva tucked Ruby into bed, brushed the girl's hair from her forehead, and turned back to the fire. Colt was still awake, staring into the embers. "Rest," she told him. "You need your strength." He nodded, but his gaze lingered on her face. "You're not afraid of me anymore." "I don't know what I am," she said honestly. "But I know that fear isn't what's keeping you here." He smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth trembling with something almost tender. "No, it isn't." She turned away, her pulse unsteady, and began to tidy the table, pretending not to feel the warmth spreading through her chest. Outside, the wind had calmed. The world was hushed, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. The firelight painted the cabin walls in amber hues, and for a fleeting moment it felt like home, not the kind she had been protecting for years, but one quietly being rebuilt from the ashes of sorrow. When Eva finally sat down, fatigue washing over her, Colt's voice came softly across the fire. "You said you live here alone. Don't you ever get tired of it?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Every day, but I'd rather be lonely than live with the wrong kind of people." "Maybe," he said. "Sometimes the right kind just gets lost along the way." Their eyes met again. Two souls bruised by life, bound by grief, held together by the smallest thread of faith. The storm outside had ended, but the storm inside them had only begun to quiet. In the fragile peace between them, something unspoken took root, something that could one day bloom into love, if either of them dared to let it. As the last embers of the fire glowed softly, Eva closed her eyes and let herself breathe for the first time in years. Healing, she realized, doesn't always come as warmth or peace. Sometimes it comes disguised as a stranger bleeding on your floor, carrying the medicine your heart didn't know it needed. And somewhere in that tender silence where the storm had once howled, a new kind of calm began to grow. If this story warms your heart like the fire that softens winter's edge, stay close for what comes next. Like, comment, and subscribe to keep walking this healing path through love, courage, and second chances beneath the wide western sky. Snow melted slowly under the first touch of spring sunlight, leaving behind the glistening earth that breathed again after long silence. Days had passed since Colt Ravencrest staggered through Eva's door, yet the cabin still felt charged with the strange electricity he brought, a warmth that wasn't just from the fire. He had begun to walk without stumbling now, his strength returning like light at dawn. And though Eva told herself he was only a guest, his presence threaded through the rhythm of her life with quiet inevitability, as natural as the mountain wind. Each morning began with the same ritual: the crackle of the fire, the scent of strong coffee, the hush before Ruby's soft laughter filled the room. Colt rose early, helping with chores as though it were the most ordinary thing in the world. He split wood in the yard, mended a broken latch, carried water from the frozen creek. He worked with steady patience, and Eva could not help but notice the gentleness in his movements, the deliberate care of a man who had once lived through too much violence and now sought to balance the scale in small ways. Sometimes, when she watched him through the window, she wondered if Thomas would have approved of this man. The outlaw turned healer, the shadow finding warmth in her fire. And in the quiet corners of her heart, she wondered if perhaps Thomas himself had sent him in some divine twist of mercy. Inside the cabin, Ruby adored him. She followed him everywhere, asking endless questions about horses, towns, and the great plains beyond the mountains. He never dismissed her curiosity. He answered every question as if each word were a promise that the world was still kind. The way he looked at Ruby softened something in Eva's chest that she had kept buried since her husband's death. Colt didn't look at the child with pity or distance. He looked at her as though she were a miracle he didn't deserve to witness. That morning, Eva was mixing herbs by the window when Colt came in from the cold, brushing snow from his coat. "You've got enough firewood to last till summer," she said without turning. He chuckled. "Maybe I like having a reason to stay busy. You don't strike me as a man who needs reasons." "I didn't used to," he said. His voice was quieter now, thoughtful. "Back then, I just moved from one job to the next, one gunfight to another. There wasn't any purpose except survival." Eva looked up from her work, her gaze steady on his face. "And now?" "Now." He paused, staring into the flames. "Now, I'd like to believe I can do something that matters." She didn't answer right away. Words felt fragile in moments like this. Instead, she poured him coffee, her hands brushing his as she handed it over. A spark passed through that touch, unexpected and grounding. He looked at her, and something unspoken lingered between them, a truth neither of them were ready to name. Later, when Ruby went outside to feed the chickens, the air in the cabin grew still again. Colt leaned against the wall, his eyes shadowed with thought. "You should know," he said finally, "who you're letting stay under your roof." Eva stiffened. "I already know enough." "No," he said softly. "You don't." He set the cup down and faced her fully. "The stories you've heard, most of them are true. I was a killer for hire. I took money to end lives, and I didn't always care who those lives belonged to." She didn't flinch. "You're telling me this now?" "Because you deserve the truth," he said. "You risked your child's life to save mine. You should know what kind of man you've let inside." For a moment the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the shelf, steady as a heartbeat. Then Eva spoke, her voice calm but firm. "I know the kind of man who brought medicine through a blizzard to save a stranger's child. That's the man standing in front of me now. The rest is your past." Colt's throat worked, but he couldn't find words. No one had ever looked at him like that. Not with fear, not with judgment, but with quiet, unwavering grace. He sat down heavily by the fire, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand, Eva. People like me don't change. We just slow down long enough to realize the blood never washes off." "Maybe," she said gently. "You've been trying to scrub away the wrong stain. Some scars don't need to vanish. They just need to be understood." Her words hung in the air, a soft kind of healing that seeped into his bones. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling something unfamiliar, peace, fragile and tentative. That night, after Ruby fell asleep, Eva sat by the window, watching snow drift lazily outside. Colt joined her quietly, a blanket draped over his shoulders. For a while, they said nothing. The world outside was hushed, blanketed in silver light. "When Thomas died," she said suddenly, her voice low, "I thought the world had ended. I buried him myself, out there near the cedar tree. Every morning I'd wake up and forget for a moment, and then it would hit me all over again, that he wasn't coming back." Colt didn't speak, but his gaze softened. "I stopped believing in miracles after that," she continued. "I stopped believing in God's kindness too, but then you came through that storm, carrying the one thing that could save Ruby. And I thought, maybe kindness isn't gone. Maybe it just finds new hands." He looked at her as though she'd said something holy. "If there's any kindness left in me," he said, "you put it there." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, rich with the quiet pulse of connection. The firelight flickered across their faces, painting gold into the grey. Outside, the wind sighed against the windows, no longer angry, only wistful. Inside, something fragile yet strong was being rebuilt from the ashes of loss. In the days that followed, the snow continued to melt. The cabin, once a tomb of sorrow, began to hum with life again. Ruby's laughter returned, bright as sunlight. She baked biscuits with Eva, told Colt stories, asked him to teach her how to ride once the snow cleared. Colt fixed the fence, carved a wooden bird for Ruby, and repaired the old clock that had stopped ticking months ago. It chimed softly again, a sound of time returning to its gentle rhythm. One afternoon, Eva stepped outside to hang laundry and found Colt leaning against the porch railing, watching the valley below. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Every day. But lately I've been thinking about what it might mean to stay." "Stay?" He turned to her, his grey eyes warm in the fading light. "You said once that storms bring what we need. Maybe mine brought me here for a reason." She looked away, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. "You can't build a new life on borrowed shelter, Colt." "Maybe not," he said softly, "but I can start building one beside it." She didn't answer, but when she went back inside, she found herself smiling. That evening, as dusk deepened into blue, Colt played the harmonica he carried in his saddlebag. The tune was low and wistful, winding through the cabin like a memory. Ruby sat on the floor with her doll, humming along, while Eva stitched a torn sleeve by lamplight. For the first time since Thomas's death, the house didn't sound like loneliness. It sounded like family. Later, when the child was asleep, Eva lingered by the fire. Colt stood by the door, looking out into the quiet night. "You should rest," she said. He nodded, but didn't move. "I don't sleep much," he admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces. Of the ones you lost, of the ones I took." She set down her sewing and crossed to him. The fire cast soft gold over her hair as she laid a hand on his arm. "Then maybe it's time to stop running from them. Maybe you can start remembering them differently, not as ghosts, but as reminders of who you don't want to be anymore." His shoulders tensed, then eased. "You talk like healing is simple." "It isn't," she said. "But it's possible." He looked down at her, eyes heavy with gratitude and longing. "You have a way of making impossible things sound real." She smiled faintly. "That's what mothers do. We keep hope alive, even when no one else will." Something in him broke open then. Not in pain, but in surrender. He reached for her hand, rough fingers brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. The touch lingered, quiet and reverent, as if both feared it might shatter the fragile peace between them. Outside, a soft wind swept through the pines, carrying the scent of thawing earth. The world was waking again, and so were they. Eva felt it in her bones, that slow, steady return of warmth after too long in the cold. The cabin no longer held just memories. It held the first breath of something new, something alive. And as the night deepened, the two souls sat side by side in silence, watching the fire burn low, the light flickering like a promise neither dared to speak aloud. Sometimes healing doesn't come with grand miracles. It comes quietly, like spring after a long winter, slow, tender, and inevitable. If this chapter wrapped warmth around your heart, stay close for what blooms next. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow the journey of love, forgiveness, and rebirth beneath the vast western sky, where even the coldest storms can give birth to healing light. The days grew brighter, but the quiet peace that had wrapped around the cabin like a prayer began to tremble. The mountain thaw had turned the snow to rivers of glass, and the light that poured through the windows seemed gentler, almost forgiving. But the world outside had not forgotten the past. Shadows had long memories, and sometimes the peace that feels like a miracle is only a breath before the next storm. Eva sensed it first. The air carried a tension she couldn't name, the kind that makes a woman check the locks twice, that keeps her awake when the fire burns low. Colt noticed too, though he said nothing. His hand lingered near the revolver at his hip more often, his eyes following the trail of every sound outside the cabin. Still, inside those walls, life felt achingly alive. Ruby laughed again, her cough gone, her cheeks pink with health. She loved to chase the first birds of spring through the yard, while Colt built a new fence post by post. Eva often caught herself watching him work, the steady rhythm of his movements, the way sunlight glinted off the rough line of his jaw. He carried the weight of his past like an invisible chain, yet every day he chipped away at it, replacing violence with gentleness, guilt with care. One morning, as Eva prepared breakfast, Ruby's giggle echoed through the window. "Mama, look! Colt's teaching me to make tracks in the mud." Eva leaned against the doorframe, smiling despite herself. The sight was too tender for words. A man once feared across 3 territories, kneeling in the earth beside a child, showing her how to see beauty even in dirt. Colt's laughter joined Ruby's, low and genuine, and it filled the air like sunlight spilling through cracks in old wood. When they came inside, Ruby's boots were caked with mud and joy. Colt met Eva's eyes as he brushed off his hands. "She's strong," he said softly. "Got her mother's spirit." Eva turned away to hide the warmth that rose to her cheeks. "She has too much of her father's stubbornness," she murmured. "Sounds like a dangerous mix," he said, smiling. For a while it felt as though the world had learned how to be kind again. They ate together each day, shared stories by the fire each night. The silence between them no longer felt heavy, but whole, like something sacred. Then, one afternoon, distant hoofbeats broke the calm. Eva froze mid-step. Colt's expression shifted, that old wariness returning like a ghost. He moved to the window, eyes narrowing at the sight of riders climbing the ridge. 3 of them, their horses dark against the pale slope. "Who are they?" Eva whispered. He didn't answer right away. "The middle one rides like a lawman," he said finally. "And the man beside him—" His jaw tightened. "Judge Blackwood." The name hit Eva like ice water. She set the bowl in her hands down too quickly, spilling its contents onto the table. "He can't be here," she breathed. "Not now." "Who is he?" "The man who wants this land," she said, voice trembling. "After Thomas died, he started coming around. Said a woman couldn't manage a homestead this size. He's been waiting for a reason to take it from me." Colt's eyes darkened. "And now he's found one." By the time the riders reached the cabin, Eva's heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. She sent Ruby to her room, whispering that it was only a visit, though the lie caught in her throat. The knock at the door was sharp and heavy, the kind of knock that doesn't ask for permission. When she opened it, Judge Aldrich Blackwood stood framed in sunlight, tall, silver-haired, his fine coat untouched by travel. Behind him were Sheriff Caldwell and old Dr. Morrison, whose gentle eyes flickered with something like apology. "Mrs. Blackthorne," the judge said, his tone polished smooth with authority, "you've been difficult to find." Eva forced calm into her voice. "The snow kept everyone in, Judge. What brings you to my door?" He looked past her shoulder, gaze sweeping the cabin. "Reports from town said you had company during the storm." "I took in a traveler," she said firmly. "He was hurt." "Of course," the judge said, stepping closer. "The good widow with her bleeding heart." "Tell me, where is your guest now?" "Resting. I'll see for myself." He tried to move past her, but she blocked the doorway. "You will not enter my home uninvited." Sheriff Caldwell shifted uneasily behind him. "Judge, maybe we should—" "Quiet, Sheriff." Blackwood's eyes gleamed. "Mrs. Blackthorne, harboring a man like Colt Ravencrest could cost you everything. Your land, your child, even your freedom." The world tilted around her. "You know who he is?" "Oh, I know exactly who he is," the judge said, smiling without warmth. "And I know there's a $500 bounty for his capture. So why don't we make this easy for everyone?" Behind her, she heard movement, Colt stepping forward. His face was calm, but his hand hovered near his gun. "You'd best lower your voice, Judge." Blackwood turned, his expression curdling into satisfaction. "Well, well, the infamous Ravencrest himself. How poetic, the widow and the murderer." Dr. Morrison stepped in quickly. "Judge, please. The man's still recovering from a wound. We can sort this out properly." "There's nothing to sort out," Blackwood snapped. "Sheriff, arrest him." "No," Eva said, her voice breaking through the tension like a bell. Every eye turned to her. She moved to stand between Colt and the lawmen. "You'll not take him from this house. He's under my care. If you move him now, he'll die." "Then that's God's will," the judge said coldly. "Step aside." "I will not." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the wind pressing against the cabin walls. Then Ruby's small voice came from the hallway, trembling but clear. "Mama?" The judge's gaze flicked to the sound, his smile thin. "Ah, the child." Colt's voice cut through the air like steel. "You so much as look at her wrong, and I'll end you before your next breath." "Threats?" Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "From a dying man? From a man with nothing left to lose?" "Enough!" Eva's voice was fierce, shaking but powerful. "This is my home. You've come here with your threats and your laws, but you forget. I've buried a husband on this land. I've built every wall with my own hands. You think you can take what's left of my life because I showed mercy? Because I helped a man who risked his life to save my daughter?" The judge's smile faded. "You're a fool, Mrs. Blackthorne," Mercy is what destroys people like you." "Then I'd rather be destroyed than live without it," she said quietly. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, from outside, came the distant sound of another horse approaching. A fourth rider. The tension in the room shifted as the door swung open and a tall figure stepped in, snow dusting his coat. "Marshal Warren," Dr. Morrison gasped. The U.S. Deputy Marshal surveyed the room with sharp, steady eyes. "Seems like I arrived just in time." "Marshal," the judge said smoothly, "good to see the law still rides these parts. You'll be pleased to know we've found the fugitive Ravencrest." Warren's gaze moved to Colt. Recognition flickered, then something like respect. "That's so." Blackwood straightened. "He's wanted for murder. I expect you'll take him into custody." The marshal's voice was calm. "Funny thing about that, Judge. A presidential pardon came through last week. Colt Ravencrest isn't a fugitive anymore." The silence that followed was thunderous. "What nonsense is this?" Blackwood barked. "Signed and sealed," Warren replied. "Conditional release. He's been working with federal agents for months, providing information on the gangs operating through these territories." Colt didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Eva, who stood frozen with shock. The judge sputtered, color rising to his face. "Even if that's true, this woman harbored him knowing who he was. That's a crime in itself." The marshal shook his head. "Not unless she knew about his federal work, which she didn't. All I see here is a wounded man saved by a widow's compassion." Dr. Morrison let out a long, trembling breath. Thank heavens. But the judge wasn't finished. His gaze turned cold, calculating. "Then let's speak of morality. A widow living alone with a killer. What do you think the community will say?" Eva stepped forward, voice trembling but unyielding. "Let them talk. I'm done living my life by the measure of gossip." The marshal adjusted his hat. "You heard the lady judge. This conversation's over." The judge's jaw tightened, fury simmering beneath his composure. "This isn't over, Warren. She'll answer for this." "Maybe," Warren said evenly, "but not today." The lawmen left soon after, the sound of their horses fading into the distance. The cabin was silent except for the steady crackle of fire and the faint sigh of wind through the chimney. Eva leaned against the door, her knees weak with relief. Colt watched her quietly. "You didn't have to stand up for me." "Yes," she whispered. "I did." He stepped closer, his voice low and rough with feeling. "You could have let them take me, and everything in your life would have been easier." "Maybe," she said, looking up at him. "But easier doesn't mean right." He stared at her for a long time, then said softly, "You're braver than any man I've ever known." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that trembles between tears. "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid." Outside, the last light of day stretched across the mountains like a promise. Ruby peeked from her room, running to Eva's arms, her small voice filled with worry. "Is it over, Mama?" Eva held her close. "For now, sweetheart." Colt stood near the hearth, watching them, his heart heavy and full. Something deep inside him shifted then, a quiet vow forming in his chest. He had come to repay a debt, but now he owed her far more than his life. The storm outside had finally passed, But in its wake, something beautiful remained, the fragile, fearless beginning of love born in the wreckage of fear. If this story wrapped your heart in warmth and made you breathe a little softer, let your light touch ours. Like, comment, and subscribe. Healing often begins in quiet acts of courage, in love that chooses to stand its ground when everything else would run. 3 weeks passed since the judge's visit, and the world outside the cabin had softened with spring. The snow melted into small rivers that ran down the hillsides, carrying the chill of winter away. New grass began to show through the damp soil, and for the first time in months, Eva could smell the earth breathing again. The air was different now, quiet, alive, filled with the faint sweetness of rebirth. The storm was over, but its echo still lingered in her heart. Colt stayed. She had told herself it was only until he was fully healed, until he had strength enough to ride again. But the wound had long since closed, and still he remained. Every morning she woke to the sound of him outside, chopping wood, fixing the fence, tending to the horses as if they were his own. Every night she saw his shadow stretched by firelight across the wall, familiar now, like the pulse of the home itself. Ruby adored him completely. The way she followed him, asking about everything under the sun, made Eva smile even when she tried not to. The little girl had lost her father so young, and somehow, without anyone meaning for it to happen, she had begun to see Colt as something more than a guest. The way she said Mr. Colt had changed. It carried the easy certainty of family, of someone who belonged. Eva told herself it couldn't last. Nothing in her life ever did. Yet when she looked out the window and saw the two of them together, Colt showing Ruby how to ride a gentle mare, his hand steadying hers on the reins, she felt something deep and dangerous blooming inside her. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was the quiet, aching warmth of love returning after a long winter. That evening, as the sun burned low over the valley, Colt came in carrying a basket of wildflowers Ruby had picked. He set them on the table, his movements careful, almost shy. "She said they're for you," he murmured. Eva smiled softly, touching one of the blossoms. "They won't last long." "Maybe not," he said, "but it's a start." There was a silence between them, but not an empty one, the kind filled with words neither dared to speak. After dinner, when Ruby had fallen asleep, Eva stepped outside. The world was bathed in moonlight, soft and silver. She wrapped her shawl tighter, breathing in the scent of pine and damp earth. Behind her, the door creaked open, and Colt stepped out, his voice low. "Couldn't sleep either?" She shook her head. "It's too quiet." He leaned against the porch post beside her. "Quiet's good. Means we're still here." They stood like that for a while, listening to the night breathe. Somewhere down the mountain, a wolf howled, long and low, then faded into silence. The stars spread endlessly above them, cold and pure, the same stars that had watched her bury Thomas, that had watched Colt fight to stay alive in the snow. "I used to hate the night," he said quietly. "Too many ghosts. And now? Now it feels like peace," he answered. "Because of you." The words settled between them, fragile and real. Eva felt the sting of tears, but didn't look away. "You give me too much credit." "Not enough," he said. "You saved my life. I stitched your wound, that's all." He shook his head. "You did more than that." You made me remember what it feels like to be human again." Her breath caught. She turned toward him, the moonlight silvering the edges of his face. "You always were human, Colt. You just forgot." He smiled then, a small, broken thing that made her heart ache. "If that's true, then you're the reason I remembered." Something inside her gave way. For so long she had guarded her heart, building walls of practicality and silence. But standing there beneath the stars, beside the man who had carried medicine through death's door for her child, those walls began to crumble. "Colt," she whispered, "when this is over, when the snow's gone and the judge forgets we exist, what will you do?" He looked out over the valley, his jaw tightening. "I don't know. I've been running so long, I wouldn't know where to stop." "Maybe you already did." He turned to her then, and for a moment neither of them moved. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, something deep and tender and afraid. His hand lifted, hesitant, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, trembling slightly. "You should go inside," he murmured. "Why?" "Because if you stay, I might do something I can't take back." She didn't move. The night felt suspended, held in a fragile kind of holiness. "Maybe it's something you shouldn't want to take back," she said softly. He breathed her name like a prayer. "Eva." The space between them disappeared. His hand found hers, rough and warm, and the world grew quiet around them. When his lips touched hers, it wasn't like the love stories she used to read by lamplight. It was slow, trembling, full of everything they had both lost and everything they still dared to hope for. It was healing. When they finally parted, her eyes shone with tears, but her voice was steady. "You're not the man you were." "No," he said, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm the man I should have been all along." The days that followed passed like a dream that neither dared to name. They moved through life with the fragile grace of people who had both known too much sorrow. Colt repaired the barn roof. Eva baked bread and hummed while she worked. Ruby drew them in the dirt outside, the three of them holding hands, stick figures smiling beneath a sun that took up half the page. Sometimes Eva caught Colt staring at her when he thought she wasn't looking, and the warmth in his eyes made her heart both ache and heal at once. Sometimes at night she would wake and hear him sitting by the fire, the soft sound of the harmonica filling the air with something that felt like forgiveness. But peace, she knew, never came without cost. One morning, Dr. Morrison rode up the trail with news that made her blood run cold. "The judge hasn't forgotten," he said grimly. "He's petitioning the territorial court in Denver. Claims you're unfit to raise Ruby. That your arrangement with Mr. Ravencrest is improper." Eva felt the room tilt. "He can't do that." "He can," the doctor said gently. "And he has. There'll be a hearing in 2 weeks." Colt stood in silence, his jaw tightening, the muscles in his neck rigid. "He's using me to hurt you." Eva stared at the floor. "He always wanted the land. Now he has the excuse." "I'll leave," Colt said immediately. "If I'm gone, he'll have nothing." "You think running will save us?" she said sharply. "You think I'll let you disappear after everything we've been through? I won't have you lose your child because of me." "You won't make that choice for me," she said, her voice trembling. "Ruby's safe because of you. Alive because of you. If that costs me everything else, then so be it." Dr. Morrison watched them quietly, then cleared his throat. "There might be another way." They both looked at him. "Marriage," he said simply. "If you two were married, the judge's claim would hold no ground. No one could call it improper." Eva froze, her heart thundering. "You can't be serious." "It's a legal solution," Morrison said. "And perhaps more than that." Colt's gaze didn't waver. "Who said anything about legal?" She turned to him, startled. "Colt?" He took a step closer, his voice soft but steady. "You think I haven't thought about it? Every day, since the storm, since I watched you stand in front of that judge for me, since Ruby started smiling again. I never planned for this, Ava, but I can't imagine walking away." Her hands shook. "You're talking about forever." "That's all I've ever wanted to find." Tears blurred her vision. She shook her head, but the protest died before it reached her lips. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn silver ring, the kind a man might carry not for value, but for faith. "Found it in my saddlebag months ago. Didn't know why I kept it till now." He held it out to her, his voice low. "I can't give you a new beginning, but I can promise you an honest one." For a long time, neither spoke. Outside, the wind moved softly through the grass. Ruby's laughter drifted in from the yard, bright and healing. Ava took the ring in trembling fingers, feeling its warmth. "Thomas once told me, love is what's left when all the storms have passed," she whispered. I think he'd want me to find it again." Colt's eyes shone, unguarded and human. "Then let me be the man who earns it." When she nodded, his breath caught like a prayer. They were married the next evening in the clearing behind the cabin, beneath the same cedar where Thomas was buried. Dr. Morrison officiated with quiet kindness. Ruby scattered wildflowers over the grass, her laughter ringing like bells. The vows were simple, two people promising to face whatever storms still waited, together. And when Colt slipped the ring onto her finger, Eva felt the weight of the past lift. For the first time in years, her heart was light. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of new life. The mountains watched in silence, their peaks glowing in the fading light. When he kissed her, it wasn't the desperate kiss of survival, but the gentle sealing of something sacred. They didn't speak of the judge that night, or the hearing, or the uncertain road ahead. They didn't need to. Some things don't need words, they only need faith. And as they stood together beneath the wide western sky, the light of day fading into gold, Eva finally understood that healing doesn't come when the storms stop. It comes when you stop fighting the rain and start learning how to stand beneath it, hand in hand with the one who refused to let you drown. If this chapter has warmed your heart and whispered hope into quiet corners of your soul, stay with us. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow this journey of love, courage, and healing under the endless sky, where redemption blooms and the heart finally learns to come home. The morning after their quiet wedding, the world seemed gentler, as if the mountains themselves had sighed with relief. The storm had taken so much from them, but now there was sunlight on the snowmelt and laughter spilling through the open door of the cabin. For the first time in years, Eva woke not to the sound of fear, but to the steady rhythm of a man chopping wood outside, a rhythm that meant safety, presence, and home. She lay for a moment, watching the dust motes spin in the light, her hand resting over the simple silver ring on her finger. It wasn't expensive, not polished, not perfect, but it was real, and it carried warmth that reached deeper than gold ever could. The sound of Ruby's giggle came from the yard, and when she stepped outside, the sight that met her heart made her pause. Colt, kneeling beside Ruby, showing her how to hold the small reins of her pony. He had built her a saddle himself from scraps of leather. It was clumsy, imperfect, and beautiful. "Morning, Mrs. Ravencrest," Colt said with a soft grin, turning toward her. The word caught her heart by surprise. She had forgotten how a name could sound when spoken with tenderness. "Morning," she answered quietly. Life on the mountain settled into a rhythm that was both ordinary and miraculous. They worked together as if they had been doing it all their lives. Colt ploughed the soil while Eva planted, her skirt brushing against rows of hope that would one day turn green. He fixed the barn door that had hung crooked since the last winter, and Ruby brought him nails as if it were the most important job in the world. At night they sat by the fire, the warmth between them quiet and full. Sometimes they spoke of small things, the crops, the animals, the seasons. Sometimes they said nothing at all, because silence itself felt like a prayer of gratitude. The healing that had begun in fear was now blossoming in peace. But peace is a fragile thing, and in the West it never lasted long. Word from the valley came through Dr. Morrison one afternoon. Judge Blackwood had not accepted defeat. His anger was like a cold wind creeping through cracks, invisible but sharp. "He's petitioned for a new hearing," the doctor said gravely. "He claims the marriage was one of convenience, an attempt to defy the court." Eva's heart sank, but Colt's expression remained calm. "Let him talk," he said. "We've faced worse storms." Dr. Morrison nodded, though worry clouded his features. "Be careful, both of you. Men like him don't lose gracefully." After he left, the cabin felt quieter, heavier. Eva sat by the fire that night, her hands folded in her lap, the glow catching on her wedding ring. Colt sat across from her, whittling a piece of wood with slow, steady strokes. The silence between them was thick with unspoken fear. Finally she said, "He won't stop until he destroys us." Colt looked up, his voice low but firm. "Then he'll have to go through me first." She met his eyes. "That's what I'm afraid of." He set the knife down and crossed the room, kneeling beside her. His hand found hers, rough and warm. "Eva, I've run from things all my life, from men worse than him, from ghosts I couldn't bury, but I'm not running any more, not from you, not from this." Her breath trembled. "You'll get yourself killed." "If it means keeping you safe, then it's a price I'd pay without a thought." Her voice broke. "Don't talk like that." He smiled gently, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "Then tell me to stay quiet, and I will. Just promise me one thing. Whatever happens, you'll keep believing that what we've built here matters. That this isn't just a refuge, but a beginning." Eva leaned into his touch, her tears warm against his hand. "It already is." Outside, the wind began to rise again, whispering through the trees like an old memory. They held each other as the flames flickered low, hearts beating in quiet defiance of the world that still sought to test them. The next week passed in uneasy calm. Ruby played in the meadow while Colt worked near the barn. Eva tried to hold on to normalcy, baking, tending the garden, singing softly to herself as she worked. But every creak of the floor, every gust of wind against the window made her tense. She could feel troubles circling like a hawk that hadn't forgotten its prey. It came one evening as the sun dipped behind the ridge. A rider approached from the valley, the same arrogant posture that Eva would have recognized anywhere, Judge Blackwood. He dismounted slowly, his fine coat still immaculate, his expression carved from disdain. Colt stepped out onto the porch before he could knock. "You're not welcome here, Judge." "I didn't come for hospitality," Blackwood replied, his voice slick with false civility. "I came to offer terms. You and the lady can keep your little domestic fantasy if you sell the land. The territory needs men who understand progress, not sentiment." Colt's hand tightened at his side. This land belongs to her, and now to us. Blackwood's eyes flicked toward the cabin window where Eva stood watching. "Ah, yes, us. How quaint. You think a ceremony in the wilderness changes what you are? You're a killer, Ravencrest, and she's a woman blinded by desperation. The law will see it that way too." "Get off my property," Colt said, his voice low, dangerous. The judge smiled. "Careful, gunslinger. The law still works faster than your draw." He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "You can't protect her forever. When the court hears the petition, I'll take the child. A woman who lives with a murderer isn't fit to raise a lamb, let alone a daughter." Colt's jaw clenched, fury flashing through his eyes. "You touch her or that child, and you'll regret it." The judge only laughed, turning his horse. "We'll see whose threats carry weight." Eva ran to Colt as the sound of hooves faded into the distance. His face was pale with rage he barely controlled. "He won't stop," she whispered. "No," Colt said, "but neither will I." That night, the storm broke again, not with snow or wind, but with fire and resolve. Eva stood by the window long after Ruby had fallen asleep, watching lightning flash behind the mountains. Colt came to stand beside her, silent. "I used to think strength was about surviving," she said softly. "Now I think it's about choosing what you'll protect, no matter what it costs." He nodded slowly. "You've taught me that." She turned toward him. "Then promise me, no matter what happens, we stay together. I can lose everything else, but not that." He took her hands and kissed her knuckles, one by one. "You have my word." The days that followed were a blur of preparation and waiting. Colt rode into town once to speak with Marshal Warren, who promised to be present at the hearing. "The law's not blind," the marshal had said, though men like Blackwood like to think they own it. When Colt returned, Eva could see the weight on his shoulders, but also something else, the quiet certainty of a man who had decided what he was fighting for. The night before they were to travel to Denver, Eva couldn't sleep. She went to the porch, the moonlight pale over the valley. Colt joined her after a while, his hand brushing hers. "Do you ever wish things were different?" she asked. He shook his head. "Different might have meant never meeting you." She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Then I'm glad for every storm that led you here." He smiled, the kind of smile that carried both peace and sorrow. "Me too." The next morning they packed quietly. Ruby was excited for the journey, unaware of the danger it carried. As they set off down the mountain trail, the cabins stood behind them, a small, brave home against a vast wilderness, holding within it all the love they had built from ashes. The road ahead was uncertain, but as they rode together beneath the rising sun, Eva felt no fear. She glanced at Colt beside her, the light catching the curve of his jaw, the promise in his eyes. Whatever awaited them in Denver, they would face it together. And that, she realized, was what healing truly meant. Not the absence of wounds, but the courage to keep living, loving, and hoping in spite of them. If this story warmed your heart and reminded you that even broken things can bloom again, stay close. Like, comment, and subscribe for the next chapter, where love stands against the storm and healing becomes a way of life beneath the wide western sky. The journey to Denver was long and quiet, filled with the sound of hooves against damp earth and the whisper of wind across the plains. The mountains faded behind them like ghosts, reminders of where everything had begun, of storms survived and hearts slowly mended. Eva rode with Ruby in front of her, the little girl clutching her small doll, humming to herself, her voice soft and fearless. Beside them, Colt rode silently, his figure steady in the morning light, his hat tilted low, one hand resting near his holster, as though the world might still demand he prove himself. They camped beneath a wide sky where stars burned like promises. At night, when Ruby fell asleep curled in her blanket, Eva and Colt sat close by the fire. She leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing in the faint scent of leather and smoke. He said little, but his silence held warmth, the kind of peace she had spent years searching for. "You're thinking about tomorrow?" he murmured. She nodded, her eyes on the flames. "I keep wondering what more he can take from us." "Nothing," Colt said softly. "He can't take what's already yours, not your courage, not your heart. He's a man who only knows how to own things, not love them. That's his curse." She looked up at him then, and her voice broke like a whisper of wind. "And ours?" "Maybe ours is that we love too deeply," he said, smiling faintly. "But I'd rather carry that kind of burden." They didn't speak again after that. The night wrapped around them like a prayer, and the fire burned low until dawn painted the world in gold. When they reached Denver, the city loomed like another kind of wilderness. Not made of snow and pine, but of men and laws, of whispers and eyes that judged too easily. Eva had never felt smaller. She had spent her life in the quiet rhythm of the mountains. Here everything moved too fast, spoke too loud. Marshal Warren met them at the courthouse steps. "You made it," he said with quiet relief. "Blackwood's already inside. He's brought witnesses, statements, even a lawyer from the capital. But don't worry. The truth has a way of standing taller than lies." Colt's hand brushed lightly against Eva's back, steadying her. "Let's finish this." The courtroom smelled of dust and old wood. Sunlight slanted through the high windows, striping the floor with gold. Eva sat at the front, Ruby beside her, holding her small hand tight. Across the room, Judge Blackwood sat with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked like a man who believed the ending had already been written. When the hearing began, his lawyer spoke first, words sharp and polished. They called Eva reckless, claimed she had compromised her child's future by marrying a criminal. They spoke of Colt's past with venom disguised as reason, a list of old crimes, names of men long dead. Each accusation felt like a stone thrown through glass, shattering the fragile calm Eva had built inside her. Through it all, Colt sat motionless, his expression unreadable, but his jaw was tight, his knuckles white where his hands clenched together. Eva's heart ached watching him. The man she had seen carry medicine through a blizzard, who had cradled her daughter with tenderness, being spoken of as if he were nothing but the shadow of what he used to be. When it was her turn to speak, the courtroom quieted. She stood slowly, her voice steady, though her heart shook. "You call him dangerous," she said softly. "But I've seen what danger really looks like. It's the fever that takes a child in the night, the loneliness that eats away at a woman when no one comes to help. It's the kind of cold that kills more souls than bullets ever could. And when that danger came to my door, it wasn't Colt Ravencrest who brought it. It was Colt Ravencrest who ended it." Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "You say I'm unfit to raise my daughter because I opened my door to a dying man. But if kindness makes me unfit, then I'll wear that title proudly. My husband didn't save me. He reminded me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. He reminded me that healing begins when you stop hiding from life." She turned to Colt, meeting his gaze. "This man risked his life to save my child. He's carried guilt for every wrong he's done, and he's trying every day to make the world softer than the one he grew up in. If that isn't redemption, I don't know what is." For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was thick, broken only by the rustle of papers and the ticking of a clock somewhere behind them. Then Blackwood rose slowly, his smile thin. "Touching," he said. "Truly. But we're not here to trade poetry for law. Mrs. Blackthorne, or should I say Mrs. Ravencrest, you think a few tears can wash away a man's sins. The law is not swayed by sentiment." Marshal Warren stepped forward, his tone calm but edged with authority. "Perhaps not sentiment, Judge, but the law does respect evidence." He handed the clerk a sealed document, signed and verified by federal authorities. It confirms that Mr. Ravencrest's pardon is legitimate, earned through months of service helping dismantle a criminal network that stretched across 3 territories. Without him, dozens of innocent people would have died, including, perhaps, people like you, Judge. Blackwood's face went pale, the confidence bleeding from him like color fading from cloth. "This is preposterous." Warren's gaze hardened. "No, Judge. What's preposterous is a man using his position to torment a widow because she refused to sell her land. The federal government's been investigating your mining operations for months. You might want to start preparing your own defense." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Blackwood's lawyer paled, glancing nervously at his client. The presiding magistrate cleared his throat. "It appears, Judge Blackwood, that this matter has taken an unexpected turn. Unless you can present further evidence, the court finds no grounds to challenge Mrs. Ravencrest's marriage or custody." The gavel struck once, the sound echoing like a gunshot of justice through the hall. Eva's knees nearly gave out. Colt was beside her in an instant, steadying her with a hand at her waist. Ruby clung to her mother's skirt, whispering, "Mama, is it over?" Eva knelt down, pulling her daughter into her arms. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, tears of relief warming her cheeks. "It's over." Across the room, Blackwood stood frozen, his empire of arrogance crumbling around him. Warren gave Colt a small nod. "You've earned your peace, son. Go live it." They left the courthouse together, stepping into sunlight so bright it hurt their eyes. The air smelled of rain and spring, the kind that makes the heart believe in beginnings again. Colt stopped at the steps, looking down at the street below. "You did it," he said quietly. Eva shook her head, smiling through her tears. "We did it." He reached for her hand, rough fingers curling around hers. "You saved me, Eva. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I was worth saving." She squeezed his hand gently. "You already have." Ruby tugged at his sleeve. "Can we go home now?" Colt laughed softly, the sound low and full of life. "Home," he repeated, as if the word itself were sacred. "Yes, we can go home." The ride back to the mountains felt different this time. Every mile carried a new kind of peace, the silence of people who had survived not just storms, but the weight of the world's judgment. When the familiar outline of the cabin came into view, Eva felt her chest tighten with joy. The place looked the same crooked fence, the same old cedar tree, yet everything about it felt new. Ruby ran ahead, shouting to the wind. Colt dismounted and turned to help Eva down, his hands lingering at her waist longer than necessary. "You're shaking," he said softly. "Just relief," she murmured. He drew her close. "Then let it happen. You've carried fear long enough." She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "This feels like the beginning of something," she whispered. "It is," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's the life we almost lost, the one we finally earned." That night, as the fire crackled and Ruby slept peacefully nearby, Eva sat beside Colt, their hands entwined. The world outside was quiet again, but not empty, full, alive, pulsing with all the things they had fought to keep. She looked into the flames, her heart at peace for the first time in years. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked. Colt smiled faintly, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. "Whatever it is, I'll face it with you. That's enough for me." And in the soft glow of the hearth, surrounded by the scent of pine and smoke, Eva knew that the past had finally loosened its hold. The storm had been real, the pain had been real, but so was this quiet, steady healing that felt like grace. If this story stirred something gentle in your heart, like sunlight after rain, stay close for what comes next. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow the rest of their journey. A story of love reborn, of healing that grows deeper than scars, and of two souls who learned that even the broken can bloom again beneath the same sky. 6 months passed, and the world seemed made new again. The valley that had once been buried beneath storms now bloomed with wildflowers, painting the hills in colors that whispered of grace. Morning sunlight spilled over the cedar trees and kissed the porch of the small cabin that had seen both death and resurrection. Eva stood there quietly, watching her daughter ride in the meadow below, her laughter echoing like music through the clean, gentle air. Ruby's hair shone gold under the sun as Colt walked beside the pony, his large hand steady on the reins. He was no longer the shadowed gunslinger who had staggered to her door that winter night. The man she saw now had peace in his shoulders, warmth in his voice, and a light in his eyes that had not been there before. Redemption, she thought, was not a miracle that happens all at once. It was something you built day by day, like a house, board by board, prayer by prayer, with your own trembling hands. The cabin had changed too. There were flowers in the window now, curtains stitched by Eva herself, the smell of bread and coffee drifting through the air. Colt had built Ruby a swing behind the house, tied to the strong limb of an old tree. It creaked softly in the breeze, a sound that blended with the hum of bees and the distant rush of the stream. Every sound spoke of healing, of the earth mending itself as they had mended too. Sometimes Eva still woke in the dark hours before dawn, her heart startled by echoes of old fears. The knock on the door, the howl of the storm, the voice of judgment whispering she wasn't enough. But then Colt's arm would tighten around her, steady and real, grounding her in the warmth of the present. His heartbeat beneath her ear was the most comforting sound in the world. "Go back to sleep," he would murmur. "You're safe now." And for the first time in years, she believed it. One late afternoon, she found him sitting on the porch, carving wood with quiet focus. His hands, once made for violence, now shaped small things of beauty, toys for Ruby, handles for tools, even small birds that he'd leave on the windowsill like offerings. She sat beside him, laying her hand over his. "You work too much," she teased softly. He smiled without looking up. "Idle hands get restless." "Your hands aren't idle," she said. "They build peace." He looked at her then, eyes tender. "Peace," he echoed. "Never thought I'd live long enough to know what that felt like." "You fought for it," she whispered. "And you found it." He reached for her hand, turning it over in his palm as though memorizing every line. "No," he said quietly. "You found it first. You just showed me the way." For a long while they sat in silence, the evening wrapping around them in shades of amber and blue. The sound of Ruby's laughter floated from the field, soft as a hymn. Eva leaned her head on Colt's shoulder, feeling his warmth soak through her. She thought of the road they had walked, the storms, the fear, the moments they nearly gave up. And now, here they were, surrounded by the kind of stillness that doesn't come from the absence of trouble, but from having survived it together. Later that night, as the moon rose over the ridge, they gathered around the fire. Ruby sat cross-legged with her doll, while Colt tuned his harmonica. The low, soothing melody filled the cabin, a song that sounded like open skies and second chances. Eva closed her eyes and let it wash over her, feeling her soul breathe. She could almost see the ghosts of the past fade into the firelight. Thomas's smile, the storm that had once tried to bury her, the fear that had kept her heart locked away. All of it burned quietly into peace. After Ruby had gone to bed, Eva and Colt stepped outside. The air was cool and clean, filled with the scent of pine. The stars were so bright, it felt as if heaven had bent low to meet the earth. They stood hand in hand, looking out over the land that had once been their prison and was now their sanctuary. "She's growing fast," Colt said softly. "Won't be long before she's riding that horse faster than me." Eva smiled. "She's got your stubbornness." "And your kindness," he said. "That's what will save her." She leaned her head against his arm. "You think we're truly safe now?" He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the stars. "Safe? Maybe not forever. But peace isn't something the world gives. It's something you make inside yourself. And I've made mine right here." Eva felt tears sting her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. "I used to think love was something you had to fight for," she said. "Now I think it's something you have to protect with gentleness." Colt kissed her forehead. Then we'll keep it safe, gentle as a prayer, strong as a promise. The wind stirred through the trees, carrying with it the scent of rain. In that moment, Eva realized how far they had come, from fear to faith, from isolation to belonging. She remembered the blizzard that had once howled at her door, the knock that changed her life, and the man she had almost turned away. Sometimes, she thought, love doesn't arrive with flowers and warmth. Sometimes it comes frozen, bleeding, and desperate. And yet, it is love all the same. As the night deepened, they stood in the quiet glow of the lantern, their shadows long and joined. Ruby stirred inside, murmuring in her sleep, and Eva smiled. Tomorrow would bring chores, laughter, small worries, the beautiful weight of ordinary life. She turned to Colt. "Do you ever wonder why it had to happen this way? The storm, the danger, all of it." He nodded slowly. "Maybe God doesn't save us from the storm. Maybe he saves us through it." Eva closed her eyes, letting the words settle in her heart like healing balm. "Then I'm grateful for every storm that brought you to my door." He pulled her closer, resting his chin atop her head. "And I'm grateful you opened it." The moonlight touched their faces, soft as forgiveness. The world seemed to exhale around them, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of life, of peace, of love reborn. And when the first drops of gentle rain began to fall, Eva tilted her face to the sky, feeling it on her skin like a benediction. Healing, she thought, isn't the end of pain. It's the beginning of peace. The storm that had once almost destroyed them had, in truth, delivered them to everything that mattered. And as Colt drew her into his arms beneath the rain, she knew that they had finally come home, not just to a place, but to one another. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that even broken paths can lead to light, I hope you'll stay with us. Leave a comment to share what this story meant to you, like the video if it brought warmth to your soul, and subscribe so we can keep walking this healing road together. Wherever you are tonight, may your storms quiet, your heart rest easy, and your life be blessed with love that finds you, even in the snow.